In the heart of Willow Creek, a small town cradled by dense forests and a winding river, the air carries the scent of pine and the faint hum of a life, both simple and secretive. The main street glows softly under flickering lamps, lined with a diner that never closes, a row of weathered shops, and a historic theatre whose marquee still boasts faded glory. Here, everyone knows your name, but not always your story until it unravels. Emily Carter moves through this world with quiet grace. A high school English teacher in her early 30s, she's the kind of woman who lingers in your memory-warm brown eyes, a quick laugh, and a passion for the books she teaches. Her classroom is a haven where students dissect tales of love and loss, her voice steady as she unravels Othello or Pride and Prejudice. At home, she shares a modest house with Jack, her husband of 5 years. He's a mechanic, broad-shouldered and easygoing, his hands stained with grease, and his smile a comfort until it isn't. One crisp autumn evening, the kitchen is bathed in the golden light of a setting sun. Jack is in the shower, the patter of water a distant rhythm, when his phone buzzes on the counter. Emily, stirring a pot of soup, glances over. She's never been one to pry, trust has always been their unspoken pact, but something, a flicker of unease, pulls her hand to the device. The screen lights up with a text from Sarah, her best friend since college. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Miss you already." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Her spoon clatters against the pot, soup splashing onto the stove. Sarah Blonde, vivacious Sarah, who'd stood beside her at the wedding, who'd laughed over coffee just last week. It can't be right. There's an explanation, surely. But her pulse races, and the room feels smaller, the air thicker. Jack steps out, towel slung low around his hips, hair damp and curling. "Hey, Em, I'm heading out. Mike needs a hand with his car again. Won't be long." His voice is casual, but his eyes dart to the phone for a fraction of a second. Emily forces a nod, her throat tight. "Okay, drive safe." He pecks her cheek, grabs his keys, and slips out the door. The silence that follows is deafening. Emily stands frozen, the text replaying in her mind like a broken record. Then, resolve hardens in her chest. She snatches her coat, the wool rough against her trembling fingers, and follows him into the night. The town is hushed, the streets empty save for the occasional rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. She trails his truck at a distance, headlights off, her breath fogging the windshield. He veers from the main road, heading toward the Rivera secluded stretch, where the water glints like liquid silver under the moon. Emily parks behind a cluster of trees, slips out, and creeps closer, the damp earth muffling her steps. There, in a clearing, she sees them, Jack and Sarah, silhouetted against the river's edge, their bodies close too close. Sarah's hand rests on his arm, and he doesn't pull away. Emily ducks behind a gnarled oak, her heart hammering as their voices drift through the mist. "We need to be careful," Sarah murmurs, her tone urgent. "If Emily finds out about the money, it's all over." Jack's reply is low, almost a growl. "She won't, not until we're ready." They linger, their shadows merging in a way that twists the knife deeper into Emily's chest. Money? What money? The betrayal is no longer just a whisper, it's a scream tearing through her. As they part, Jack heading back to his truck, and Sarah vanishing into the trees, Emily remains rooted in the shadows. Her world has cracked open, spilling questions she can't yet answer. What are they hiding? How long has this been festering? And what will she do with the pieces of her shattered trust? Emily's breath came in shallow gasps as she watched Sarah vanish into the trees, her mind scrambling to process what she'd just seen. The river flowed quietly beside her, its serenity clashing with the turmoil raging inside her. Money, betrayal, secrets. The words looped in her head, each one honing her anguish into something sharp and cutting. She waited until the growl of Jack's truck faded before creeping back to her car, the chill piercing through her coat and settling into her bones. Her hands shook as she clutched the steering wheel. But going home wasn't an option, not yet, not with questions clawing at her. Instead, she drove to the old library at the town's edge, a place that had always offered her solace. The library stood like a monument to the past, its stone exterior worn by decades, its shelves brimming with books that carried the scent of dust and lost tales. As a child, Emily had escaped into stories of heroines defying the odds here. Now, she craved that same refuge, that same resilience. She sank into a faded armchair by the window, moonlight painting silver streaks across the floor, and wrestled with the fragments of her broken world. Sarah and Jack. How long had this been brewing? What was this money they were so frantic to conceal? Her thoughts darted to the last few months, Jack's late nights at the garage, Sarah's newfound passion for weekend trips, their too-easy laughter at dinner parties. Clues she'd dismissed as routine, now glaring like neon signs of deceit, each one a fresh wound. Confronting them head-on felt too dangerous. If they were hiding something this massive, they'd bury it deeper. No, she had to outsmart them, play their game. A plan flickered to life in her mind, vague, but solidifying. She'd act oblivious, keep them near, and dig until the truth surfaced. The next morning, Emily woke to coffee brewing and Jack humming in the kitchen. For a fleeting moment, she lay still, last night's events a hazy nightmare. But the ache in her chest snapped her back to reality. She dragged herself up, forced a smile, and joined him. "Morning, babe," Jack said, sliding her a mug. His eyes were warm, but she couldn't unsee him with Sarah by the river. "Sleep okay?" "Like a rock," she lied, the coffee bitter on her tongue. "You?" "Garage as usual. Few cars to patch up." He leaned against the counter. "All ease." "You?" "Grading papers. Maybe a walk." She paused, then tossed out casually, "Oh, Sarah might stop by. Said she has something to talk about." Jack's hand stilled, mug halfway to his mouth, a faint crack in his mask, a spark of panic in his eyes. "Oh? What's that about?" Emily shrugged, playing dumb. "No clue. Girl stuff, probably." She studied him over her mug, pulse racing. "Why? Something I should know?" He grinned, recovering fast. "Nah, just curious. You know Sarah Hallway's full of surprises." Yes, Emily thought, and so are you. The day crawled by, every minute testing her grit. At school, she taught in a daze, her mind elsewhere. When the bell rang, she rushed home, steeling herself for Sarah's visit. If she was in this game, she'd be prepared. Sarah breezed in just after 5, blonde hair wind-tossed, smile dazzling. "Hey, got your favorite chocolate croissants?" She waved a bakery bag, stepping in like it was routine. Emily took it, their fingers brushing. "Thanks. You're too good to me." The words tasted like ash. They settled in the living room, late afternoon light stretching shadows across the floor. Sarah prattled about work, a new Guiley's, Emily saw now, threads in their tangled web. Then Sarah's tone grew weighty. There's something I need to tell you," she faltered, glancing at the window. "It's about Jack." Emily's heart kicked up. Was this the confession? She leaned in, voice calm. "What about him?" Sarah inhaled deeply. "I think he might be hiding something from you. Something big." The room tilted. Emily gripped the couch arm, mind whirling. "What do you mean?" "I overheard him on the phone talking about a lot of money. A deal or investment." He sounded secretive. Sarah's eyes were wide, her face sincere. "I didn't want to worry you, but you should know." Emily stared, gears clicking. This wasn't a confession, it was a dodge. Sarah was pinning it all on Jack. But why? What was her angle? Before Emily could reply, the front door banged open. Jack stepped in, face ashen, freezing at the sight of them, his eyes darting between her and Sarah. "Jack," Emily said, voice taut, "Sarah was just telling me something interesting. About you. And money." The air thickened. Jack's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing. What exactly did she say? Sarah shot up, hands fidgeting. "Jack, Emily cut in, standing. "She said you're hiding something. A lot of money. Care to explain?" Jack's expression darkened, anger flaring. "Sarah, what the hell are you doing?" "I'm trying to help," Sarah's voice quavered. Emily watched them, fury boiling hotter. They were both liars, actors in this sick play. She wouldn't let them win. "Enough," she snapped, sharp as a blade. "I know about the river. I saw you both last night." Their faces blanched, silence crashing down, the truth a heavy shroud. Jack stepped forward, hands up. Please, it's not what you think." A sharp knock at the door cut him off, jolting them. Emily's stomach flipped. She wasn't expecting anyone. She crossed to the door, hand hovering on the knob, then opened it. A stranger stood there, crisp suit, face blank, holding a thick envelope. Mrs. Carter? His voice was smooth. Yes, Emily said, brow furrowing. He handed her the envelope. This is for you, from Mr. Harrington's estate. Emily's breath hitched. Mr. Harrington, her long-lost uncle, a ghost from her past tied to rumors of wealth. She'd nearly forgotten him. The man nodded and left, melting into the dusk. Emily shut the door, tearing open the envelope with shaky hands. Inside, a letter blurred as she read. To my dear niece, Emily, by the time you read this, I will be gone. But I leave you my legacy sum that will change your life. Use it wisely. A check was clipped to it, the figure astronomical, beyond her wildest dreams. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the floor, papers slipping from her grasp. Jack and Sarah gaped, their shock tinged with something greed, fear. The money they'd schemed over it was hers all along. But as Emily met their eyes, betrayal's weight crushed her. This wasn't just about cash, it was trust, love, the life she'd believed in. Now, with this fortune, she could rewrite it all, yet a chilling question slithered in. How far would they go to keep this buried? And what would she do to survive? The room hung silent, tension electric, as Emily clutched the check, their fates teetering on the edge. Emily's hands trembled as she clutched the check, its significance weighing heavily on her. The room was silent, thick with tension, and the lingering, now stifling scent of Sarah's perfume. Jack and Sarah stood motionless, their expressions a blend of shock and something more troubling, perhaps desperation, or the realization that their secretive plans were falling apart. Her mind spun. This money, an unexpected inheritance, offered a way out of the chaos her life had become. Yet, it also made her a target, drawing unwanted attention she couldn't fully grasp. She needed to strategize, but the sting of betrayal clouded her thoughts. Looking at Jack, her voice remained calm despite the turmoil within. So, this is what you were hiding? This is why you and Sarah were sneaking around behind my back? Jack's face twisted with guilt and defiance. It's not what you think. We were trying to protect you. Protect me? Emily's laugh cut through the air, sharp and bitter. From what? From the truth. From the fact that my husband and my best friend were conspiring against me. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes pleading. Emily, please. It's not like that. We didn't know about the inheritance. We were just... Just what? Emily interrupted, her stare intense. Just having an affair? Just plotting to take something that wasn't yours? The accusation lingered, heavy and charged. Jack's jaw clenched, his fists tightening. We weren't having an affair, Em. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Jack? Emily's voice escalated, her emotions breaking free. Explain it to me, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you two have been lying to me for God knows how long. Sarah's face fell, tears brimming. Emily, I swear it's not what you think. We were trying to help you. Help me? Emily's tone dripped with disbelief. By sneaking around? By whispering about money behind my back? Jack moved closer, his voice low and urgent. Listen to me. There's more to this than you know. Your uncle, Mr. Harrington, he wasn't just some distant relative. He was involved in things, dangerous things. And now that you've inherited his estate, you're in danger too. Emily's heart stuttered, a chill creeping down her spine. What are you talking about? Jack glanced at Sarah, who gave a small nod. Your uncle was mixed up with some bad people. People who won't be happy to see his money go to someone else. We were trying to find a way to protect you, to keep you safe. Her thoughts spiraled, puzzle pieces, shifting chaotically. So, you knew about the inheritance? You knew and you didn't tell me? Jack's shoulders slumped, regret lacing his words. We found out a few weeks ago. Sarah overheard a conversation at the diner, and we started digging. We didn't want to worry you until we knew more. Emily's anger surged again. So, instead of telling me, you decided to handle it yourselves, to keep me in the dark while you played hero. Sarah's voice was soft, almost a whisper. We thought we were doing the right thing, Em. We didn't want you to get hurt. Emily's hollow laugh echoed in the room. Well, congratulations. You've managed to do just that. Silence descended, thick with unresolved tension. Emily's eyes dropped to the check, the figures blurring as tears threatened to spill. She needed to escape, to clear her head away from their excuses and half-truths. Wordlessly, she turned to the door, snatching her coat. Jack's desperate voice trailed after her. Wait, where are you going?" "I need some air," she replied flatly. "Don't follow me." She stepped into the cool evening, the door clicking shut behind her. Willow Creek lay quiet, its streets empty except for the soft rustle of leaves. Emily wandered without direction, her mind a storm of anger, betrayal, and fear. Jack's warning gnawed at her. Dangerous people, her uncle's dark secrets. Was it true, or another deception? She no longer knew what to trust. Deep in thought, she didn't see the figure lurking in the shadows until it was too late. A hand clamped over her mouth, stifling her scream, and she was pulled into the darkness, the world fading to black. Emily's world spun as she regained consciousness, her head throbbing with a dull, insistent pain. The air was damp and musty, the kind of scent that clung to old, forgotten places. She blinked against the darkness, her eyes struggling to adjust. Her wrists ached, bound tightly with rough rope, and her mouth was dry, the taste of fear bitter on her tongue. She tried to piece together what had happened. The last thing she remembered was walking through Willow Creek, her mind a storm of betrayal and confusion after confronting her husband Jack and her best friend Sarah about their secretive behavior. Then, a hand over her mouth, a sharp pull into the shadows, and everything went black. Panic surged, but she forced it down, focusing on her breathing. She needed to stay calm, to think. Where was she? Who had taken her? And why? Meanwhile, back at the house, Jack paced the living room, his face a mask of worry and guilt. Sarah sat on the couch, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. "We have to call the police," Jack said, his voice strained. "Emily's missing. We can't just sit here." Sarah shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "We can't, Jack. You know what those people are capable of. If they find out we involved the cops, it could make things worse for Emily." Jack slammed his fist against the wall, the sound echoing through the room. "Then what do? We can't just do nothing." Sarah stood, her resolve hardening. "We find her ourselves. We know more about this than the police do. We have to use what we know about her uncle and the people he was involved with." Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched on his face. "Fine, but where do we start?" Sarah thought for a moment. Emily's uncle had a study in his old house. Maybe there are clues there, something that can tell us who might have taken her. Jack nodded, grabbing his keys. "Let's go." Back in her prison, Emily strained to hear any sounds that might give her a clue about her location. Faint voices drifted through the walls, muffled but discernible. The money? Harrington's deal? She doesn't know. Emily's heart raced. They were talking about her uncle's inheritance. But what deal? What had her uncle been involved in? She tugged at her restraints, feeling the rope bite into her skin. If she could just loosen them a little. After what felt like hours, she managed to create a small amount of slack. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She scanned the room, her eyes now accustomed to the dim light. It looked like a basement, with concrete walls and a single grimy window high up, letting in a sliver of moonlight. On the floor near her, she spotted a rusty nail. If she could reach it, maybe she could use it to pick at the ropes. Stretching as far as her bonds allowed, she inched her fingers toward the nail. Her fingertips brushed against it, and with a final push, she grasped it. Carefully, she began to work the nail against the rope, fraying the fibers bit by bit. Meanwhile, Jack and Sarah arrived at Emily's uncle's old house, a sprawling, dilapidated mansion on the outskirts of town. The air was thick with neglect, the once grand estate now a shadow of its former self. They made their way to the study, a room filled with dusty books and forgotten papers. Sarah began rifling through the desk drawers, while Jack scanned the bookshelves. "Look for anything that mentions business deals, partners, or enemies," Sarah instructed. After several minutes, Jack pulled out a leather-bound journal. This might be something. He flipped through the pages, his eyes widening as he read. It's a record of transactions, meetings with various people. Some of these names, I recognize them. They're not good people, Sarah. Sarah leaned over his shoulder, her face paling. This is worse than I thought. Emily's uncle was involved with some serious criminals. Jack pointed to a name circled in red. Victor Slade. I've heard of him. He's a loan shark, known for his ruthless tactics. Sarah's breath caught. Do you think he's the one who took Emily? It's possible, Jack said grimly. We need to find out where he operates. Back in the basement, Emily had managed to free one hand. She quickly untied the other, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She stood, her legs shaky, and crept toward the door. It was locked, but the window might be a way out. She dragged a crate beneath it and climbed up, peering through the grimy glass. The view was of an alley, deserted and dark. She tried to push the window open, but it was stuck. Desperation clawed at her, but she refused to give up. She needed to find another way. Just then, the door creaked open, and a figure stepped into the room. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. The man was tall, with a scarred face and cold, calculating eyes. He looked at her, surprise flickering across his features as he saw her freed from her restraints. "Well, well," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You're more resourceful than I thought." Emily backed away, her mind racing. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The man smirked. "I'm just a messenger, Mrs. Carter. My employer has a vested interest in your uncle's estate. He believes you might have information that could be useful." "I don't know anything," Emily insisted, her voice steady despite her fear. "I didn't even know about the inheritance until yesterday." The man's eyes narrowed. "That may be, but my employer is not one to take chances. He wants to ensure that you don't become a problem." Emily's mind whirled. "What does that mean?" "It means," the man said, stepping closer, "that you're going to stay here until we figure out what to do with you." Emily's eyes darted around the room, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. She spotted a broken chair leg in the corner and lunged for it, swinging it at the man. He dodged easily, grabbing her wrist and twisting it until she dropped the makeshift weapon. "Nice try," he sneered, shoving her back against the wall. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she refused to cry out. "You won't get away with this," she spat. "My husband and friend are looking for me. They'll find me." The man chuckled. "Oh, I'm counting on it. In fact, I'm hoping they do. It'll make things much more interesting." With that, he turned and left, locking the door behind him. Emily slid to the floor, her body trembling. She had to find a way out before it was too late. Meanwhile, Jack and Sarah had left the mansion and were now standing outside a rundown bar on the edge of town. The sign above the door read The Rusty Nail, its neon lights flickering sporadically. "This is where Victor Slade hangs out," Jack said, his voice tense. "We need to be careful." Sarah nodded, her face pale. "Let's go in and see what we can find out." They entered the bar, the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke assaulting their senses. The patrons were a rough crowd, their eyes following Jack and Sarah with suspicion. Jack approached the bartender, a burly man with a tattooed neck. "We're looking for Victor Slade," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The bartender eyed him warily. "Who's asking?" "Friends of a friend," Jack replied cryptically. The bartender grunted and jerked his head toward a booth in the back. "He's over there, but I'd be careful if I were you. He doesn't like unexpected visitors." Jack and Sarah made their way to the booth, where a man sat nursing a drink. He was older, with graying hair and a sharp hawk-like gaze. "Victor Slade?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man looked up, his eyes assessing. "Who wants to know?" "We're here about Emily Carter," Sarah interjected. "She's been taken, and we think you might know something about it." Slade's expression remained impassive. "Emily Carter, huh? Harrington's niece?" Jack nodded. "Yes. We found your name in his journal. What was your connection to him?" Slade leaned back, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Harrington owed me money, a lot of money. When he died, I thought I'd never see it. But now, his niece has inherited everything. Funny how that works." Sarah's eyes widened. "So? You took her to get the money?" Slade chuckled. "I'm not that sloppy, but I know who might have. There are others who had dealings with Harrington, others who might see his niece as a way to settle old scores." Jack leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Who? Tell us who might have taken her." Slade's smile faded, his eyes turning cold. "Information isn't free, my friends. What are you willing to offer in exchange?" Back in the basement, Emily had managed to wedge the nail into the window frame, using it as a lever to pry it open. With a final push, the window creaked open, and cool night air rushed in. She hoisted herself up, squeezing through the narrow opening. Her heart pounded as she dropped to the ground outside, landing in a crouch. She was in an alley, the buildings around her unfamiliar. She needed to find help, but she had no idea where she was. As she started to run, she heard shouts from inside the building. Her captor had discovered her escape. Fear propelled her forward, her feet pounding against the pavement. She turned a corner and saw a figure standing in the shadows. "Help!" she cried, her voice hoarse. "Please, help me!" The figure stepped forward, and Emily's blood ran cold. It was the man from the basement, his scarred face twisted in anger. "You shouldn't have done that," he growled, advancing toward her. Emily backed away, her eyes darting for an escape route. But before she could move, another figure emerged from the darkness, striking the man from behind. The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Emily looked up, her breath catching as she saw her rescuer. It was a woman, tall and imposing, with a stern expression. "Who are you?" Emily gasped. The woman's eyes were sharp, assessing. "Someone who knew your uncle, and someone who knows you're in way over your head." Emily's mind reeled. "What do you mean? Who are you?" The woman glanced around, her voice urgent. "There's no time to explain. They'll be coming for you. We need to get out of here." Emily hesitated, unsure whether to trust this stranger. But with her captor lying unconscious and the sound of approaching footsteps, she had little choice. She nodded, and together they disappeared into the night, the mystery deepening with every step. The night pressed in around Emily Carter like a suffocating shroud as she followed the mysterious woman through the labyrinthine streets of Willow Creek. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt, and every shadow seemed to pulse with unseen threats. Her sneakers slapped against the pavement, the sound swallowed by the distant hum of traffic and the occasional rustle of leaves skittering across their path. Her chest ached from running, her breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. But she didn't dare slow down, not after what she'd been through. The woman ahead of her moved with purpose, her long strides confident, despite the tension radiating from her frame. She hadn't said much since pulling Emily from the back seat of that unmarked van hours earlier, her words limited to curt instructions. "Stay low, move fast, don't look back." Now, as they turned into a narrow alley flanked by crumbling brick walls, she finally spoke. "We're almost there," she said, her voice a low growl that cut through the stillness. "There's a safe house up ahead. We can regroup, figure out our next move." Emily nodded, too winded to reply. Her mind was a storm of questions. Who was this woman? Why had she risked her life to save me? What did she know about Uncle Henry's inheritance? But exhaustion dulled her ability to voice them. She clung to the hope that answers awaited her at this so-called safe house. They reached a small, unremarkable building squeezed between two taller structures, its faded paint peeling like old skin. The woman fished a key from her pocket, her movements swift and practiced, and unlocked the door. She ushered Emily inside, locking it behind them with a decisive click. The room was dim, lit only by a sliver of moonlight seeping through the drawn curtains. A threadbare couch sat against one wall, flanked by a rickety table and a pair of mismatched chairs. It wasn't much, but it felt like a fortress after the chaos of the past day. "Sit," the woman said, pointing to the couch. "You're safe here, for now." Emily collapsed onto the cushions, her legs trembling as the adrenaline ebbed away. She watched as the woman paced the room, her sharp blue eyes scanning every corner as if expecting an ambush. She was tall, lean, with dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail and a leather jacket that bore the scars of hard use. There was something both fierce and weary about her, a duality that made Emily uneasy. "Who are you?" Emily asked, her voice cracking from strain. "And how do you know my uncle?" The woman stopped pacing and turned to face her. For a moment she said nothing, her gaze piercing through Emily like a blade. Then she sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. "My name is Lena," she said, softening her tone just enough to ease the edge. "I knew your uncle well. We were partners of a sort." Emily's brow furrowed. "Partners? What does that mean?" Lena crossed her arms, leaning against the table as she considered her response. "Your uncle, Henry, wasn't the man you thought he was. He wasn't just some quiet businessman who left you a modest inheritance. He operated in shadows money laundering, smuggling, deals with people you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. I was part of that world with him." Emily's stomach twisted, a cold dread settling in her bones. "You're saying my uncle was a criminal?" Lena nodded, unflinching. A smart one. He kept his hands clean on the surface, but underneath, he was neck deep in it. That inheritance everyone's after? It's not just cash or property. It's a key to a vault documents, ledgers, proof of every dirty deal he ever made. Whoever gets that vault controls his network, and there are plenty of people willing to kill for it. Emily's mind flashed to Jack and Sarah, their hushed conversations about Victor Slade, the loan shark tied to her uncle's debts. She'd thought the secret they were hiding was an affair, but it was worse, far worse. Slade, she whispered. He's one of them, isn't he? Lena's eyes darkened. You've heard of him? My husband and my best friend, Jack and Sarah, they mentioned him, said Uncle Henry owed him money. That's the tip of the iceberg, Lena replied. Slade's a player, but they're a bigger fish. Your uncle double-crossed a lot of people, and now they're circling like sharks. That's why you were taken. They think you know where the vault is. I don't! Emily's voice rose, frustration bubbling over. I didn't even know about this until yesterday. I believe you, Lena said, raising a hand to calm her. But they don't, and they won't stop until they're sure. Emily buried her face in her hands, the weight of it all crashing down. Her uncle's death had been a shock, but this was a nightmare. So what do I do? How do I get out of this? Lena sat across from her, her expression resolute. We find the vault first. If we get those documents, we can use them as leverage, trade them for your safety. Maybe even expose the whole operation. And how do we find it? Emily asked, lifting her head. Your uncle was paranoid, Lena said. He left clues, scattered them so no one could piece it together without all the parts. He trusted me with some of it, but you're his family. He might have left something for you, something only you'd recognize. Think, Emily, did he ever give you anything unusual? A gift? A letter? Something that didn't make sense at the time? Emily's thoughts drifted back through the years, sifting through memories of her uncle. He'd been a quiet man, stern but kind, always slipping her little trinkets when she was a girl. Then it hit her. The locket, she said slowly. He gave me a locket when I was 10. It has a picture of him and my mum inside. I always thought it was just sentimental. Lena's eyes lit up. Do you have it? No, it's at home, Emily said, her heart sinking. In my jewelry box. Then we need to get it, Lena said, standing abruptly. It could be the key literally or figuratively. But my house, Emily started, panic rising. They're probably watching it. The people who took me, they'll know I'd go back. Lena's jaw tightened. Then we'll be careful. We'll go in, grab it and get out. No lingering. Emily swallowed hard, nodding despite the fear clawing at her chest. Okay, let's do it. Meanwhile, across town at the Rusty Nail, Jack Carter and Sarah Jennings sat across from Victor Slade in a dimly lit booth. The bar was a dive, its air thick with cigarette smoke and the sour tang of spilled beer. Slade lounged in his seat, a wiry man with a predator's grin, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the table. So, he drawled, you want to know who's got your wife, Carter, and you think I'm just going to spill it for free? Jack's hands clenched into fists beneath the table, but he kept his voice steady. We're not here to play games, Slade. Name your price. Sarah shot Jack a quick glance, then leaned forward. We can offer you a piece of the inheritance. Once we find Emily and secure it, you'll get your cut. Slade's eyes gleamed with interest. How much we talking? 10%, Sarah said firmly. He barked a laugh. 20, or I walk. Jack's patience snapped. 15, that's our final offer. Slade tilted his head, sizing them up. After a long moment, he grinned. 15 it is. You've got guts, Carter. I like that. He extended a hand, and Jack shook it, the deal sealed in a grip that felt like a warning. Now talk, Jack said. Slade leaned in, lowering his voice. Word is, Marcus Kane's the one who snatched her. Real estate mogul, big money, bigger temper. He and Harrington had a falling out years back over a deal that went south. Kane's been obsessed with that vault ever since. Sarah's breath caught. Marcus Kane? The guy who owns half the city? That's him, Slade said. He's got resources men, money, hideouts. If he's got Emily, she's probably at one of his spots. I'd start with the old warehouse on the edge of town. It's off the books. Perfect for keeping someone quiet. Jack stood, his mind already racing ahead. Thanks, Slade. We'll be in touch about your cut. Better hope you find her alive, Slade called after them as they left. Kane doesn't mess around. Outside, Sarah grabbed Jack's arm. "A warehouse? That's our lead?" "It's all we've got," Jack said grimly. "Let's move." Back at the safe house, Emily pulled on a dark hoodie and cap Lena handed her, the fabric rough against her skin. "We need to blend in," Lena said, checking her own gear knife tucked into her boot, a phone in her pocket. "Stick close, and don't make a sound unless I tell you." Her pulse hammering as they slipped out into the night. The streets were eerily quiet, the occasional flicker of a street lamp casting long, jagged shadows. Every noisier car backfiring. A dog barking sent her nerves into overdrive, but Lena's steady presence kept her grounded. They reached Emily's house after 20 tense minutes, crouching behind a row of bushes to scope it out. The windows were dark, the yard silent, but the air felt charged, like a storm about to break. "Back door," Lena whispered, pointing. "You've got a key?" "Under the flower pot," Emily replied, her voice barely audible. They crept around the side, staying low. Emily retrieved the key with shaking hands and unlocked the door, the hinges creaking faintly as they stepped inside. The familiar scent of home lavender candles and old books hit her like a punch, but there was no time to linger. They moved upstairs to the bedroom, where Emily pulled the jewelry box from her dresser. Her fingers fumbled as she opened it, revealing the small silver locket nestled among her earrings and bracelets. She held it up, its delicate chain glinting in the faint light. "Here," she said, handing it to Lena. Lena opened it, studying the photo of Henry and Emily's mother, then flipped it over. Her fingers traced the edges, searching for anything hidden. "There's something here," she muttered, pressing on the back. A tiny click sounded, and a thin panel slid open, revealing a folded slip of paper. Before they could examine it, footsteps thudded down stair-chevy, deliberate, unmistakable. Lena's head snapped up. "Someone's here. Window now." They scrambled to the bedroom window, shoving it open. Lena climbed out onto the sloped roof first, then helped Emily follow. They slid down to the backyard, landing in a crouch just as a figure emerged from the shadows. "Stop right there!" a man barked, his gun gleaming in the moonlight. Lena stepped in front of Emily, her stance defiant. "Who are you?" The man smirked, his face half hidden by a hood. "I'm here to collect. Hand over the locket." "It's mine," Emily snapped, clutching it tighter. "It's the key to everything," he said, taking a step closer. "Give it up, or I'll take it off your corpse." In a blur, Lena lunged, slamming into him. The gun flew from his hand, skittering across the grass as they grappled. Emily froze, her breath caught in her throat, watching as Lena dodged a punch and drove her elbow into the man's jaw. He grunted, swinging wildly, but Lena was faster, pinning him down with a knee to his chest. "Who sent you?" she hissed. He spat at her, blood staining his lips. "Cain, and he'll bury you both." Lena's fist connected with his temple, and he went limp. She stood panting and grabbed Emily's arm. "Run!" They bolted, disappearing into the night as shouts echoed behind them. At the warehouse, Jack and Sarah crept through the shadows, the air thick with dust and decay. The vast space loomed around them, broken machinery and crates casting eerie shapes. They'd barely made it 10 steps when a voice cut through the silence. "Looking for someone?" They whirled to see 5 men stepping from the darkness, their faces hard and unforgiving. The leader, a broad-shouldered brute with a scar across his cheek, smirked. "Who are you?" Jack demanded. "Call us the welcoming committee," the man said. "You're trespassing." Sarah's voice trembled but held firm. "We're here for Emily Carter. Where is she?" The man laughed. "Not here, sweetheart, but we'll take a message." Jack stepped forward. "Tell us where she is. Or what?" the man sneered. "You'll regret sticking your nose in Cain's business." The men charged, and the warehouse erupted into chaos. Jack swung at the nearest attacker, his fist connecting with a satisfying crunch, while Sarah grabbed a rusted pipe and cracked it against another's skull. They fought hard, but the odds were against them 5-2, and the men were relentless. Just as a thug pinned Jack to the ground, the warehouse doors slammed open. "Freeze!" a voice roared, and police officers stormed in, weapons drawn. "Everyone down!" The attackers froze, then dropped their weapons, hands raised. Jack and Sarah stumbled back, breathless, as an officer approached. "Jack Carter?" Sarah Jennings? He asked. Jack nodded, wiping blood from his lip. Yeah. Got an anonymous tip about this place, the officer said. You're lucky we showed up. Sarah frowned. Anonymous? Who? No idea, he replied. But they said you were in danger. We'll take it from here. As the police hauled the men away, Jack turned to Sarah. Emily's not here. Where the hell is she? We keep looking, Sarah said, determination stealing her voice. We don't stop. Back at the safe house, Emily and Lena pored over the slip of paper from the locket. Under the flickering light of a lamp, Lena deciphered the tiny scrawl. Coordinates. It's a spot outside town, she said, plotting it on a map. An old cabin in the woods. That's where the vault must be. Emily's heart raced. Then we go there. At dawn, Lena agreed. Rest now. Tomorrow's going to be hell. Emily lay on the couch, the locket in her hand, her mind spinning with revelations and dread. The truth about her uncle, the danger closing in, the uncertain fate of Jack and Sarah hit, all swirled together, keeping sleep at bay. As dawn broke, she steeled herself for what lay ahead, knowing this was only the beginning of the end.